Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Don't worry, we're going to get started in about a minute or so. But while we're waiting for everyone to join, I just wanted to take a minute to thank our visionary donors for making this event and other Let's Talk Science programming possible. I'd like to call them out because they are so important to us: Amgen Canada, the Government of Canada, Hibernia, the Mitchell and Catherine Barron Family Foundation, Rio Tinto, the Trate Family Foundation, and also thank you to our event partners, Let's Talk Science, ArcticNet, the Canadian Space Agency, Genome Canada, the Royal Society of Canada, and the Stem Cell Network. Thank you for bringing us all together from across the country. I want to share a bit of housekeeping notes as well. You will see a chat button in this Zoom webinar. We'll be posting messages to you here just to give you a heads up on things that are happening, and to share resources. But note that you can't send us messages through the chat. Instead, to ask your questions to the panelists, or to ask for tech support or anything else you need to share, any other comments, please use the Q&A button. We have a wonderful event team who's going to help, and our panelists would love to hear from you. I want to see all the questions because I know you have lots of really good ones. Whatever's on your mind, throw it into the Q&A section, and we'll do our best to get to as many of them as we can. I'll also remind you, you can turn on automatic closed captioning. You can toggle it on or off using the CC button. And you can also send us your reactions. Let us know how you're feeling, what you're thinking, using the reactions button. That's all for housekeeping. We'll give another few seconds for everyone to join and get started shortly. All right, let's jump into what's going to be a packed and really, really delightful session. Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Learning. I'm Samantha Yammine, and I am very excited to be your moderator for this excellent event. Today, we have an absolutely stacked panel to teach us about the science of how the brain learns, plus research on the wonderful diversity of learning strategies and how that can support anyone and everyone to succeed in your dreams, no matter what they may be. Just to introduce myself, my name is Samantha Yammine. Online, especially on social media, I go by the nickname Science Sam. I'm trained as a neuroscientist. I studied the cells of the brain and how they build the wonderful brains that we all have today. But now I work as a science communicator, where I get to share about all kinds of science through social media, through events like this, on TV, as an expert on The Good Stuff with Mary Berg, and in all sorts of places. Now to get into today's event. Today we're learning about learning. And there's a long history of that on this land. I, for example, am joining you from Toronto, and for many thousands of years before the first colonial settlers arrived here, many First Nations considered Toronto a meeting place due to its abundance of food sources and vast networks of rivers, which offered easy to travel between portage narrows. So it's very cool we're continuing that tradition of meeting, albeit in this virtual space. I also want to share that Toronto, a name whose origins are from the Kanien'kehá:ka or Mohawk word Toronto, translates to the place in the water where the trees are standing. It's a reference that's said to come from the Haudenosaunee and Huron-Wendat fishers who posted stakes for fishing weirs in the narrows of the river systems. As a guest on this land, I extend tremendous gratitude to its original stewards, including the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, the Anishinaabeg, and Mississaugas of the Credit, and the creatures and spirits of those who came before us, with whom they cohabited peacefully. I encourage everyone to think about the continuation of colonialism today and how we can bring justice and resolution for everyone. I'm also aware that many of you are tuning in from various regions across Canada, which are traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of numerous First Nations that carry thousands of years of profound history. It's important for us to recognize and honor the stewardship of the Indigenous peoples who remain the original inhabitants of these lands. I encourage you to visit native/land.ca to learn about the traditional territories you are located on and to research the many STEM contributions of Indigenous people. We'll hear more about that soon. If you want to post your thoughts on today's symposium on social media, please tag at Let's Talk Science on Facebook or X and at LetsTalkScience_HQ on Instagram. And just so you know, we now have a new discussion guide on the symposium resource page that goes with every visionary symposium. Whether you're joining us live or watching the recording, you can print it and engage in discussion and reflection with your peers before, during, and after the symposium. There's a set deadline before which you can submit your answers to our questions for a chance to win prizes. Did you hear me? There's prizes on the line here. And you can have your contributions featured on the Let's Talk Science webpage for so many people to see and learn from. For more information, you can refer to the resource page or contact the Let's Talk Science team if you have any questions. And I see a handy little link has been posted in the chat for you. Now, we're going to have some interactive polls used today. So for this, we're using Poll EV, and you'll need to use a personal device for this. So to submit your answer, you can go to pollev.com/LTS 2017. I think you see it on the screen, and follow the prompts there. You can also text LTS 2017 to 37607, then text in your response. If you don't have a personal device, you're welcome to share your answer in the Q&A box to play along. So let's try this out. My first question for you is, do you think there is one most effective way of learning? Let me see what you all are saying. So you go ahead and use that poll feature. We got a 50-50 split right now between yes and I'm not sure. Not really is coming in now hot. Let's see. Oh, that's really fun. Dating Live, we're evenly split. So it seems like we're all across the board. You all are doing great with that poll. Love to see it. Keep that energy going all session long. And today we're going to hear from our expert panelists, Jeremy, Adele, and Jodi. They are an incredible trio who will bring their expertise in answering this poll question. And they're going to share their learnings from everything from space exploration to neuroscience and education research. Like, what a great, in itself, like, many different areas of STEM where they have expertise coming together to tackle this big challenge of learning from these different areas with so much different lived and academic experience. We're really lucky to have all three of them here today. Please submit your questions. Take advantage of this opportunity. Use the Q&A box as they come to mind at any point. We're going to try to address as many questions as possible during our panel discussion after all the presentations are done. So don't worry, keep the questions coming. And at towards the end of the hour, we're going to get into them. Now, first, I'm very happy to introduce Jeremy Hansen. Jeremy was selected as an astronaut candidate in May 2009. And since 2011, he's become a full-fledged astronaut and has represented the Canadian Space Agency at NASA. In 2017, he became the first Canadian to be entrusted with leading a NASA astronaut class, which means that he was in charge of training astronaut candidates from the US and Canada. Now, I was honored to be in Houston, Texas last year when it was announced that Jeremy would be part of the history-making Artemis II mission, our first crewed mission back to the moon since the Apollo program that ended in 1972. It is so exciting. It'll be the first ever crewed flight test of the Orion spacecraft launching on the SLS rocket. Also incredible feats of STEM that are so cool. And he will become the first Canadian to ever venture to the moon. Jeremy, thank you for kickstarting our session today.
Thank you so much, Samantha. Great to be with you all today. Super excited to just spend some time with you and talk a little bit about learning. And most important to me is just conveying the genius that is inside of you and the contributions that you have to make to the world. And I just want you to feel empowered to do that. So let me see if I can get these slides going. Here we go. So in about a year from now, we're going to fly this rocket for the second time. So this is the SLS rocket, the Space Launch System. And at the top of this rocket is a capsule that holds 4 humans. And this picture is of Artemis I, the first time we flew this rocket. It didn't have any people on it. It was a test flight. It was very successful. And we're working on, in fact, I was just in Florida yesterday. I'm back in Houston today, but yesterday I was looking at the actual capsule that I'll be flying on, and they're getting it ready to go. And once our rocket is built, in around a year from now, I will walk out of this quarantine facility at the Kennedy Space Center with my 3 crewmates, Christina, Victor, and Reed. We'll drive out to a launch pad. We'll go up to the top. It'll look just like this, except there'll be a rocket there on that day. We'll climb inside the capsule. Some of our colleagues will strap us in and get us ready to go. We'll wait for the rocket to be completely ready. Everyone will clear the pad. And then this is what will happen next. So when the rocket has done its work, we'll be traveling about 25,000 kilometers an hour, maybe 28,000 kilometers an hour. And we'll have a view of this, like this, of our planet hanging in space. And we're going to spend about a day doing some testing in our capsule before we head to the moon. But this is a real picture taken from Artemis 1. And this is the back of the the Orion capsule. And this is the actual capsule that we're going to fly in. This is ours being built. They haven't even put a hatch on it in this picture. It now has a hatch on it. I was looking at it yesterday. But this is the part that we'll be living in for 9 days as we go on our journey. And our mission is to get this capsule ready for future Artemis missions to the surface of the moon. We won't have a lunar lander on our mission. So our job is to test this technology, to learn how to fly this capsule, to test the life support systems in it, to manually pilot the capsule. And so to do all of that safely, our plan is to launch from Florida, fly around the planet once. It'll take us about an hour and a half. If everything looks good and the capsule is working and the solar panels have deployed, then we'll fire our engines again. We'll accelerate a bit more. And we're going to go way out to about 60,000 kilometers and then come all the way back in to about 200 kilometers. And that's going to take about a day. And that's by design, because that gives us a day to learn with the ground team, with mission control. We're going to try a bunch of things on the capsule to make sure that we think it can support 4 humans for the journey around the moon. And after that day, we will fire our engines again. We'll do this translunar injection burn. We'll accelerate to 39 times the speed of sound. And we'll fly out, fly around the moon, and come back. And after a 9-day mission, we'll splash down in the Pacific Ocean. And we're going to see things like this. This is a real picture from Artemis 1 mission, that had nobody on it. But the thing that I'm experiencing as I go through this, obviously I have a lot to learn, but what's really neat to watch is how the team has to learn together. We have a lot to figure out to build these new vehicles that can go further into space, that can stay in space longer, that can get to the south pole of the moon instead of just the equator of the moon. All these things we have to learn. And the key thing that I would convey about this experience in watching it is that we create solutions. We constantly bump up against unknowns. We bump up against things we don't know. And we bring our minds together and we look for solutions or for tests that we can do to figure out what we need to know before we go and do this for real out around the moon. So we create solutions. That's one thing. There's something else we have going for us, and it's that we have a common goal. And so a country like Canada, and Samantha was highlighting, I'll be the first Canadian to go into deep space, but I'll actually be the first non-American. Canada will be the second country in the world to send a human into deep space. And that is because we are part of a big goal. We have decided we will work on technologies and solutions that help the partnership. Canada earned its right or this opportunity to be on this mission of sending the second human into deep space from another country other than the US. And that's an extraordinary compliment to our country. But here's how you can apply that in your life. Just like a country like Canada sets a goal, or the international partnership, all of our countries working together set goals, you and I can set goals in our life. And when I was a young Canadian, I saw an image like this in a book called Encyclopedia A. This is before the internet. And I realized that's extraordinary. Humans left our planet, walked on the moon. And so I set a goal of becoming an astronaut. And then I did something really important, actually critical when I look back on it. I shared that goal with other people, like my parents, teachers, mentors. And when I look back on it, I realized I needed a team of people around me to help me accomplish my goal of becoming an astronaut. And I still need a team of people around me. And so this is something that you can do in your life. You don't have to set career goals, but you might set a 6-month goal or a 2-year goal, and then share that goal with other people. And you're going to be amazed at how they will help you to achieve it. And I've seen the same thing happen with Artemis. It's bringing people together to help us achieve this goal of sending people back to the moon. And I just wanted to share this mission patch with you that was designed by this artist, Henry Guimont, from the Turtle Lodge, which is led by Sabe here. And Lisa Campbell, the president of CSA, is in this image as well. And Henry designed this patch, and he included a lot of symbology in it. But one of the things he included was these 7 sacred teachings, and they are represented by the animals. And in here we have the buffalo for respect, the eagle for love, the bear for courage, the sabe for wisdom, for honesty, the beaver for wisdom, the wolf for humility, and the turtle for truth. And these are just things that will help guide you as ways that we should walk on planet Earth when we're trying to accomplish these goals. And we won't be perfect in them, but we can aspire to follow them. And I'll share one more about the beaver at the end of today's presentation. But the last thing I wanted to share with you today is that when you set big goals in your life, the one thing that I can guarantee you that you will bump up against is failure. Everybody faces failure at some point or another, and often multiple times. And we're trying to build this lunar lander. And look in the bottom of this picture. Here's a tiny human down here. This is just a drawing. It's not real. But this is what we're building, this lunar lander called Starship. It's enormous. And this is what it looks like in real life. It's the black part of this rocket up top. So this is an enormous rocket. This is the first part that actually takes the lander to space. But the thing to recognize, I'm going to show you a video of how they work through failure to get to success. When we start off trying to do something hard, we don't know how to do it. But we try things. We accept that we will fail, but we are committed to pushing through the failure and creating solutions. And so I have to tell you, nobody gets hurt in these videos. There's nobody on these rockets. They're just tests. But just remember how big these pieces are. And you're going to see the team working through how do we land these rockets so that we can reuse them.
We're now down to 3 Raptor engines. We can see those chopsticks now in here.
Booster running current shutdown.
Adele has popped the booster.
So that was a pretty epic thing that happened about a week and a half ago, catching the first stage of that rocket. And the point is, if you really want to learn, you have to be willing to fail. You have to have the courage to fail and push through it. So I'll leave it there, and I look forward to chatting more.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, for sharing about your exciting journey. And I especially appreciated the celebration of failure. It really resonated with me, just to say that it's a normal part of science. And that's probably my favorite part of science is we all just get really comfortable with failure because it's a necessary part of the process. I know we're all excited to continue asking you questions in our Q&A session. And so I want to remind everyone to keep putting questions in that Q&A box. I already saw lots of ones coming in. Keep them coming. I saw someone say how proud they are to see Jeremy be the first Canadian and first non-American in deep space. We will get to your questions and answer them during the panel. But next, I'm very, very excited to welcome Dr. Adele Diamond. Adele is the Canada Research Chair Professor of Developmental Cognitive Neuroscience at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. A leader in 2 fields, psychology and neuroscience, she co-founded the field of developmental cognitive neuroscience. That's a big deal. Her specialty is the study of executive functions, especially in children. She holds 3 honorary degrees, is a member of the Royal Society of Canada, was listed as one of the 15 most influential neuroscientists alive today, for good reason, and was honored for lifetime contributions to developmental psychology in the service of science and society. Adele, you icon, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks very much. Let me see. Okay.
So my specialty, as Samantha said, is executive functions. Executive functions have been found to be more predictive of academic and career success than socioeconomic status or IQ, and thus they've been described as the mental toolkit for success. There are three core executive functions. I'll start with inhibitory control. Inhibitory control at the level of attention is focused attention or selective attention. Being able to inhibit distractions so you can focus and stay focused even if the material's boring. For example, being able to concentrate on what someone is saying on the phone when someone else is talking to you in the room. I do that to my husband all the time. Inhibitory control at the level of behavior is self control or response inhibition. Resisting temptations, not acting impulsively, thinking before you speak or act. Like resisting looking at your cell phone when you're in class. Other examples of when self control is needed include not blurting out the first thing that comes to mind, resisting acting in the heat of the moment, like not pressing send right away on an angry email message, resisting jumping to a conclusion of what something must have meant or why it was done, because we can be wrong. Discipline and perseverance require self control to resist the many temptations to quit and not finish what you started. Evidence indicates that discipline accounts for over twice as much variation in final grades as does IQ. The second core executive function is working memory, holding information in mind and working or playing with it. It enables us to mentally play with ideas and relate one idea to another, do mental math. It also enables you to remember a question you want to ask as you're listening to your teacher or a classmate. Remember what you wanted to do after you get interrupted. Maybe someone asked you a question or there's an unexpected noise. Remember the multiple points you want to make as you're speaking or writing. Working memory is critical for making sense of anything that unfolds over time, for that always requires holding in mind what happened earlier and relating that to what's happening now. So that's obvious for oral language, but it's also true for reading, because even at the level of a sentence, rarely do you see all the words at the same time. The third core executive function is cognitive flexibility, being able to see something from different perspectives, think about something in a whole new way, switch between tasks. For example, instead of focusing on your shortcomings, which you're not so good at, you can use cognitive flexibility to switch perspectives and focus on your strengths, the way in which you're amazing. Or instead of worrying about the future, you can use cognitive flexibility to switch to focusing on and enjoying the present. Cognitive flexibility also includes having the flexibility to take advantage of a sudden opportunity, to get around an unexpected problem, or even admit you were wrong when you get more information. If there's a problem you haven't been able to solve, can you think outside the box to conceive of the problem, frame the problem in a whole new way, come up with a completely different way of attacking it? Executive functions depend on prefrontal cortex and the other brain regions with which it's interconnected. Prefrontal cortex occupies a huge percentage of the human brain, a whopping 30% of our cerebral cortex. Prefrontal cortex is the newest area of the brain over the course of evolution and the most vulnerable. Stress impacts prefrontal cortex sooner and more severely than any other brain region. Stress can cause anyone to look as if he or she has an executive function impairment like ADHD when that's not the case. Even mild stress increases the amount of dopamine in prefrontal cortex, but not anywhere else in the brain. And if you flood prefrontal with dopamine, it can't work properly, and so you don't have as good executive functions. A few weeks of stress in preparation for a major exam disrupts communication between prefrontal cortex and other brain regions and impairs executive functions. Stress, even if very mild, impairs the executive functions of most people. And stress especially impairs the executive functions of people with the best working memory capacity. So those with the best potential will likely be the most negatively impacted by stress. There's a difference between the excitement and exhilaration of being challenged and the anxiety of feeling stress. Joy and the challenge of pushing one's limits are better motivators than fear or anxiety. Joy is not the opposite of serious. Research shows we learn more and get more done when we're happy. Creativity requires that you feel happy and relaxed enough to be playful. The fact that executive functions are so important for success and happiness in most areas of life, and that stress impairs executive functions, intersects with issues of social justice because societal wrongs like inequality, racism, and discrimination create stress. Executive functions can be taught and practiced through wilderness survival, woodworking, martial arts, auto mechanics, farming, weaving, dance, sports, music making, etc., and also through science, math, language arts, history, etc. Each of these activities requires cognitive flexibility, perseverance, focused attention, indeed all the executive functions. The distinction between academic and enrichment activities is arbitrary. An activity students love that challenges cognitive flexibility, working memory, etc., will improve executive functions more than a class that students find boring. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much, Dr. Diamond. You had me laughing. You had me feeling called out in all the best ways, and also feeling empowered with the way that we see that prioritizing reducing stress and challenging ourselves and allowing space for joy can really actually scientifically be impactful. So you can take that back to anyone who says that you shouldn't play your favorite sport or whatever. We will definitely have a lot more questions to continue that discussion, but I am eager to get to our next talk, which is going to be by Dr. Jodi Asbell-Clarke. Okay, Jodi is an educational researcher focusing on game-based learning, computational thinking, and neurodiversity in K-12 STEM education. Previously a software analyst on the U.S. Space Shuttle program and a high school teacher, she now leads numerous national and international STEM education projects at TURC, a nonprofit organization focusing on innovation and equity in STEM education. She's also the author of a recent book called Reaching and Teaching Neurodivergent Learners in STEM, Strategies for Embracing Uniquely Talented Problem Solvers. This is going to be a phenomenal talk from a woman who's done many things. Thank you so much, Jodi. The floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Let's see. There we go. There. So thanks, everyone. And what great speakers so far. I hope I can keep up. I am a research scientist at TURC, as Sam said, and I study how people learn. And in my journey over studying how people learn, what I've learned is that we all learn very differently. But I'm most interested in focusing on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And I look at how people thrive in STEM problem solving. When I wrote my book, I was able to talk to about over 100 employers and employees in STEM companies that were hired under neurodivergent hiring programs or worked with those programs. And by neurodivergent, most of you probably know that term already, but just in case, it can include autism, ADHD, dyslexia, other learning differences. And as Adele told us, sometimes those learning differences aren't caused by something you were born with. It could be caused by stress or other physical and social conditions that can create those. But when we look at STEM problem solving and what skills are required and what companies and enterprises are looking for in STEM problem solving, as Jeremy told us, and we've looked at persistence, stick to it. In fact, when I started my career back in the 80s, I went to graduate school to look at putting an observatory on the far side of the moon. And that work, we wrote papers on it and did work on it 40 years ago. And that work is now just starting to take off when Jeremy and Artemis go back to the moon. It's just made possible. So a lot of STEM problem solving, the big ones, require keeping the eye on that long-term goal. They also require creativity and innovation to think of things that nobody ever thought of before, like putting an observatory on the far side of the moon. And it also requires systematic thinking, looking at causal relationships, what's cause and effect, and how do logically the steps go together to solve a problem. What's interesting is that these same qualities are often associated with some of those neurodiverse and neurodivergent conditions or situations. Some of them are, software companies who look for debuggers or people who want to find errors in software, they love having someone who is completely focuses on fine detail and persistent and will not sit still until every case is examined and checked off. And it turns out that people with autism have some of those high focused, high persistent qualities. Similarly, people with ADHD often show signs of enhanced creativity and idea generation. So these are the qualities that STEM companies are looking for. But also with those qualities come the requirements for communication and completing tasks and collaboration. These are all required, but how these happen should be negotiable. Some people like to think by themselves and solve a problem individually. Others want to work in a group. Some people need quiet to complete their tasks. And this is all part of how workplaces and schools can be accommodated. So one thing to think about is, how do you prefer to communicate? Do you work best one-on-one? Do you work best in a group? Do you communicate best digitally through text or email or DMs? Or do you want to have a conversation in person? Which are the ways that are best for you? Research shows that including multiple ways allows everybody to get involved and will include more people into STEM problem solving. So also, what helps you stay on task and be persistent? What contexts motivate you? What types of problems motivate you? Do you work better in silence or with music, or do snacks motivate you? These are all things to learn about yourself. And again, how do you problem solve? Alone, in a group? Some people like a body double, somebody to work by their side, even if you're working on different things, just to have somebody there. Other people want solitude. And when you create all these different kind of conditions so that people can choose the way that they work, then learners have what's called agency or control over their learning process. And they're given the autonomy for thought. And those are exactly the qualities that the neurodivergent employees that I talked to in STEM said were most important for their workplace. So I challenge you to take charge of your own learning. Identify your problem-solving strengths, identify your needs and what kinds of supports you need for executive function, and self-advocate. Let other people know how you will work best, and also adjust for others. Remember, we all work differently, so you can make your places better by helping your own strengths and others. So this is what I've written about, what I research about, and here's how you can contact me, and I'd love to hear more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Asbell-Clarke. It was incredible to round out our presentations today with your expertise to show us how anyone can be successful once we're empowered to use our unique perspectives and even our neurodivergence as a strength. With the correct support systems in place, that's the path to success. Thank you so much. Please, everyone, now that you've heard from these three inspiring panelists, fire up that Q&A box. And I am delighted that now we can spend at least the next 25 minutes or so getting those questions that you have answered by our wonderful panelists. So we'll gather all of our speakers here for that discussion. This is your opportunity. You have these three world-renowned experts, so please continue submitting those questions. And to kick things off, I have some questions already lined up because you all have been on fire today. So Jeremy, can we start with a question for you? You showed us your incredible mission patch and how it features the 7 grandfather teachings. But Amanda Green had a question about which teaching you find the most supportive or inspiring for your journey to the moon.
I love that question. It was something I wanted to speak to anyway. The one I share most often is the teaching of the beaver. Really, they all resonate with me, but this teaching of the beaver, I think, is very applicable to all of you today watching. And the teaching is simply this, that the beaver has a special gift. And I think you can all identify what the beaver's special gift is. It can chew down trees. And that's a pretty extraordinary gift. You know, if you've ever walked by like a big hardwood tree, a big maple tree, you've probably never thought to yourself, I might just chew down that tree. It's a pretty big task. And so the fact that this rodent can chew down trees is pretty extraordinary. But the teaching of the beaver is that the beaver has the wisdom to use its gift to change its environment, to use the life-giving resource and power of water to reshape an environment that supports others in living their lives and contributing their gifts. And the final part of the teaching is that inside of each one of us is a special gift. And that applies to each of you. Inside of each one of you is a special gift. And the wisdom you're trying to obtain is how you use your special gift to help others in this world. And you have to experiment and try things. But you will know when you find your gift because you'll feel energy. You'll feel lifted up. You'll want to work on the problem. The people I'm sharing the stage with today, if you will, they're all people who have found their gifts. And they are sharing them with the world, and they are making the world a better place. They're using their energy to do good. And I think that is a beautiful teaching that was shared with me from the elders of the Turtle Lodge and part of my preparation for going to the moon.
Thank you. I love that. And it really sums up what we heard from Dr. Diamond and Asbell-Clarke too, about finding your unique path and using those strengths. And that's a great teaching. And I hope that everyone takes that to heart. Be like a beaver, just like Jeremy will be at the moon. Adele, Dr. Diamond, we have a question for you from Bianca Sestak from Gonzaga. Shout out to Gonzaga. With large developments in AI tech recently, how do you feel it will impact students' executive function skills?
I worry a little bit because every time we have a technological aid, it means that you don't have to do it yourself. So the brain isn't learning how to do it itself. So now that we can use our phones to navigate around in space, we've actually found that the brain basis for spatial navigation doesn't function as well in us because we haven't been using it. And for a brain region to work well, you need to keep using it and challenging it. So I actually worry that executive functions might suffer a little bit because we might rely on AI too much.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's a good reminder to see these tools for what they are. They're tools to help us. They're not replacements. And so I think as much as we can use them to make things easier, but not rely on them solely, that sounds like some good advice for all of us and one that I need to remember. Jodi, Winter had a question. How does a neurodivergent brain learn differently than a neurotypical brain? And I see a lot of conversation on TikTok about neurodivergence. And so I'm glad we have an expert here to clarify those differences.
So I'm not really sure about the word neurotypical because neurotypical applies, there's one normal brain, and there's actually imaging that shows that everybody's brain is different. There are common structures, there are common regions that with functions, but everybody's wiring's a little different. And that wiring, we're born with it, some differences, those differences grow as the brain develops, and also as we use parts or don't use parts, as Adele just said, it can what's called prune. And so we all end up with different, just like we all have different faces and body types and everything, we all end up with different brains. Having said that, there are some characteristics of certain brain patterns of behavior and demonstrated that that are associated with these categories that we call autism and ADHD and dyslexia or other differences. And personally, as a learning scientist, I steer away from the medical categories for my own research because they're not always equitably diagnosed and because often people fall into many different categories at the same time. So for me, it's easier to talk about neurodiversity and neurodivergence in my research for that reason. But I hope that it somewhat answered the question. Everybody's brain's a little bit different.
I think
Adele,
that's a
do you have anything
fabulous.
to add to that?
That's good.
Yeah, I think it's a fabulous answer. And I, again, like my algorithm keeps trying to diagnose me with something every week. And I'm sure other people can relate. So just be mindful and don't let those be limiting labels that we put on ourselves. And I like how you said to consider the strengths too, rather than over medicalizing. So that's really helpful perspective as we're scrolling. Jeremy, Serene Mansouri has a question for you about your preparation for your mission. So as you're preparing for the Artemis II mission to launch to the moon, do you feel fully equipped for the challenges ahead? They're really curious on specific training and preparations to ensure success. And if that's even possible, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. I think to answer one aspect of that, I don't feel equipped for these challenges. Really, as an individual, it's one of the reasons why that patch is so meaningful for me, and because for me it represents a relationship with teachers and elders across the country, not just from the Turtle Lodge, but from other nations. It's just one example of people sharing their knowledge, their understanding to equip me with what I will need to tackle the things that I may not be able to predict that could happen. In our training as astronauts, we do things like we use aircraft. We have these jets that we fly, and we do that because flying is unpredictable to a certain extent. You can do a lot of things. You can train, you can flight plan, but at the end of the day, you do enough flying, you're going to be scared sometimes. You're going to be faced with situations where you have to make decisions. And we practice being adaptable. We practice being able to bring in information and make a decision, even when you don't know what the answer is. A lot of times, tough decisions are not like math, where there's a right and there's a wrong answer. You just have to do something. Sometimes in operations like space flight or flying, you can't do nothing. You have to do something, and you're not sure what to do. And you have to develop this ability to leverage your brain, your body, your intuition. There's a lot available when you learn to leverage it. And I have I've learned to trust my intuition to carve a solution path in a tough situation. And that's an important skill set I lean on a lot to deal with uncertainty. And you as human beings going through life, I'm raising 3 children. They're 20, 18, and 18. And I watch them, obviously, as they navigate their path through life. You are dealing with a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unknowns, a lot of pressure. And one of the ways that you can adapt to that and work through it is to simply convince yourself that you can co-create solutions with other people. If you ask for help, people love to help. How many of you like to help other people? You all raise your hand. When somebody asks you for help, you love helping them. That is like a natural human thing. That's why we're the dominant species on this planet, is because we are hardwired to help one another. So you can lean into these resources and you can co-create solutions. So the same way you're going to prepare for advanced education and life and all of the challenges is the same way I'm preparing to go to the moon.
What I heard in that answer, Jeremy, was what Dr. Diamond was saying: cognitive flexibility,
Yes,
like that
totally.
ability to adapt. So it's cool to see the real world application of that core neuroscience research.
Yeah, let me just say, I took a couple of photos. Oh, sorry. I just want to say I took some photos of your presentations today because I'm sending them to my kids when we're done.
Right?
I disagree slightly with one thing Jeremy said, because helping each other is not unique to humans. It's very much a characteristic of animals in general. And you also see animals helping us. They want to help. I think the animal species are wired because that's important for survival.
It's true. And it is rewarding to help one another. And I remember, Jeremy, when you were announced for the mission last year, one of the things that you and your crewmates were talking about was being able to trust and rely on one another. And that necessary teamwork to survive the failure, I think, and to persevere is something that we need to remember, because it's scary to share your dreams and your goals, but you need other people to achieve them.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for pointing that out, Dr. Diamond. So true about nature.
Yeah, neuroscience in the neuroscientist in the house has to point out those things. Adele, Dr. Diamond, I have a question for you. Sorry, I'm switching between your names here. I like them both so much. Olivia Knockin from Gonzaga again wants to know, how do the functions of a young person's brain differ from an average brain of an adult? So are there any traits with the executive functions in the brain that might disappear as a person ages and develops?
They don't disappear. Executive functions don't fully mature till your mid-20s. But my dissertation was with babies in the first year of life. And you can see all of the executive functions in babies. They problem solve. They have to exercise self-control occasionally. They show working memory. So you see it at every age, but it gets better as you get up to your late teens and early 20s.
That's some nice permission to give ourselves some grace, especially for the high school students and younger tuning in. Your executive function parts of the brain are still developing, and so things are going to be tough, and all the more reason to reach out for help, as we've discussed. Dr. Asbell-Clarke, I got a question for you from David B. What would you say that the best way is for someone with, they call it severe ADHD, like them, to stay focused during studying?
Well, I think it's something you have to discover for yourself, because everyone's different, but I can tell you that a lot of people do like some kind of background noise. So they call it white noise, where it's just sort of a sound. It's not someone speaking. It's not your favorite song, but it's just white noise. There's also pink noise and brown noise, where they change the frequency and the bass, and some things help for different people. Some people like to put scheduled breaks in, so that if I can get to 10 minutes of focusing, then I can have a snack, or I can walk around the block. And then if you do it for 10 minutes at a time, sometimes you can stretch it a little longer. Probably the biggest thing that will influence it is being able to have some control over what you're working on. If you enjoy what you're working on, you still might need to have physical stimulus. You still might want to walk around and stuff, but you're going to want to solve the problem, and you're going to be interested to keep thinking about it.
That motivation there to support the focus. We got another one for you. You've given us a lot of tips on good learning strategies, but Drew C wants to know, what's one of the worst learning strategies?
And again, it's going to be the one that doesn't work for you. So that's my biggest point. But also, I would say probably for most people, waiting till the last minute and trying to cram a bunch of information into your head so that you can regurgitate it the next day on a test. I don't know if that works for anybody. So I would say that's probably the worst. And not sleeping and not eating well, and taking care of yourself is a big part of all of that.
We're seeing the science lining up, because Dr. Diamond was telling us how stress and the fear and anxiety are not helpful, lack of sleep, all that. So that self-care actually mattering. Jeremy, I want to hop over to you. We have a question from Amanda Green that's a really juicy one. So when you and your crew get to take your journey around the moon, if you had a chance to make a statement like Neil Armstrong's one small step, what would you say? This is your test audience. It's a big question.
No pressure. Yeah, thanks a lot, Amanda. That's great. I am 100% going to decline on making a statement like that. If I had to, I would definitely give it some thought before I said it. But I will say one thing. What really matters to me and my crewmates during this mission is that we contribute positively to the world. And so we know Artemis II isn't going to solve the world's issues. We have a lot of struggles on this planet, a lot of things to be worried about. And the biggest one is that we as humans are not collaborating globally. The space program is a beautiful example of collaboration and countries coming together to do great things and to use our energy for good. But as an overall species, my assessment is we're failing. We're killing one another in parts of the world, and we're not sharing, and we're not helping one another equally, and we don't have mutual respect across the board. And so we would love our mission to contribute to reminding humanity that we can do better than we're doing today, and that it is possible to set goals and to use our energy for good instead of destroying things. And we hope that during Artemis II, people will take pause. There will be 4 humans on the far side of the moon taking a picture, like I showed you earlier, of our planet from the perspective of the moon. And humanity did that, and it's extraordinary. And we hope people will just pause for a moment and remind themselves of how much we have in common, and how much we can rely on one another to make this planet a different place. And I did want to kind of hop in on the last question, because I was thinking about, and I would like the other 2 of you to correct me if I'm wrong here, but when I'm speaking with my children, a lot of times I find myself trying to change the mindset. And I think it's tied into that, what I was just saying about humanity's mindset, about what's possible. And when you're learning, I see a lot of times my children are coming up with preconceived notions about what they're good at and what they're bad at. And I saw that in your presentation, Dr. Diamond. It's one of the slides I took a picture of. But I just wanted to, that's a strategy that I can't imagine works, where you're saying, I'm going to fail this. I look at that feeling you get, your brain is going to tell you that, right? You're preparing for a test, and you're going to hear that voice in your head is going to say, you might fail this test. You're going to hear that. And I think of that like a smoke detector in my house. That's like, uh-oh, this means I'm probably not as prepared as I should be right now. Thanks very much, smoke detector. I don't need you to keep buzzing. I know about the fire. Now I'm going to do something about it. But if I just sit there and say, smoke detector has gone off, I'm going to die in this house, that doesn't work, obviously. I don't know how that would work with education. So when you feel that feeling, you just got to say, thanks for the information. Now I know it's a problem, and I'm gonna start working on a solution. I think that mindset of believing that you can do it has to be critical. I see Dr. Diamond nodding, so I'm optimistic.
It's totally critical. And I want to give 2 examples. One is what we can learn from ourselves when we were little. All toddlers fall on the way to walking. We all fail. But the toddler doesn't give up. The toddler keeps trying. And we adults don't say you get a D in walking today. That wouldn't occur to us. We say, don't worry, I'm sure you're going to be able to do this, right? So we need to say to the students, I'm sure you're going to be able to do this, and we together are going to figure out a way to make that happen. And the other thing I wanted to say about the truth of what you were saying is, in social psychology, there's a little cottage industry in something called stereotype threat. There are lots of stereotypes in our culture. Like, one is that in general, men are better at math than women. And so a group of researchers went to a university, gave a standardized math test, and no surprise, as a group, the male students performed better than the female students. Then they took exactly the same test to an exactly comparable group of students. The only difference was they said one sentence before the exam. They said, this particular test has been designed to be gender neutral. On this particular test, women do as well as men. And what happened? The women did as well as the men. The only difference was the expectations the women had for themselves. So what you're saying is 100% correct.
And can I just add it to go back to what Jeremy also said about it takes a team. If that smoke detector goes off, you don't have to sit in the room by yourself trying to figure it out. There are other people, your parents, educators, friends that are there to talk it out. And you'll be there for them when they need you to. It's a two-way exchange.
Asking for help is a sign of wisdom, not weakness.
Exactly.
I love all of that. I train in Muay Thai, which is like Thai kickboxing. And one of our coaches always says, don't start your training session saying, oh, I'm not feeling good today. Make an excuse. Oh, I'm kind of tired today. Instead, just give, if you only have 60% in the tank that day, give 100% of that 60. and you don't need to count yourself out before you've even started. We're approaching our end, but I think we have time for a few more quick ones here. Jeremy, Natalie, Grace, Jose, or Joe's wants to know, how do you stay motivated to keep learning new and complex topics through the challenges of space training? And any advice for students who are struggling to stay interested when STEM subjects get tough? I want to hear from you and then also from the other two on how to keep motivation.
Yeah, I heard a little bit about it in I think it was in your presentation, Dr. Diamond. I'm not sure which one it was now, but about staying interested, staying focused even when things aren't interested, and that's just part of life. And so, not all subjects interest me. Not all subjects and getting ready to fly to space are really naturally interesting to me. But I'm motivated because I want to contribute, and I said I would. And so, at your phase of life, your way of showing up for humanity is to complete your studies, and you're going to love some of your courses, and those are the ones you probably should carry on into the future, and that's probably leading you towards your gifts. But other ones, we just need you to show up and complete them. It's just part of your contribution. And for me, that is all that's required, is just knowing this is expected of me and me wanting to do a good job. And I hope that can just know, or that can be enough for you to want to pursue pushing through the hard subject matter. And you probably, in the end, there's not many things that have happened to me in life where I don't look back at them and say, yeah, I'm glad I actually experienced that. That was helpful in hindsight.
Yeah, I would also say that the person asked around STEM is everywhere. So it might be boring in the context that you're applying it to. It might seem boring, but there's so much science and math in music and in art and in puzzle solving and in sports. There's always, so if you can find a way or have your teacher help you find a way to discover the STEM in what you do love, and what parts of anything that you have to study that you do love, and use that as your doorway in. You don't have to end there, but use that as your doorway.
Thank you. As my last question to you all, I want to get in one sentence. What is your top tip to students? If they only walk away remembering one thing, what is your top tip for students when it comes to learning? Dr. Diamond, let's start with you.
Hard to do one sentence, but I think I'd emphasize something Jeremy talked about, which is about mistakes. Einstein said anybody who's never made a mistake has never tried anything new. If you go beyond what you know, you have a 50-50 chance of being wrong. If you're afraid to risk making a mistake, then you won't go beyond what you know, and you won't learn and you won't grow. One of the premier chemists of the 20th century said, you haven't failed until you've tried for the last time, and you haven't lost until you quit. Now, this man is African American, born in the Deep South. You know he experienced a lot of discrimination and setbacks and failures. Yet he rose to become one of the most decorated chemists of the 20th century. So don't give up. Believe in yourself.
Ain't that the tea? Jeremy, over to you. One sentence challenge, top tip for learning.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Set goals in your life. Do the important part of sharing them with others. Expect failure, and persevere.
Incredible. And Dr. Asbell-Clarke?
I'd say learn about your own strengths and weaknesses. Be a self-advocate, and remember that everybody has strengths and weaknesses.
I love that from all three of you. Thank you so much for joining and answering all these wonderful questions from students across the country. Fantastic questions. We learned so much in today's panel from your expertise. Jeremy, you taught us to share our dreams so people can help us make them possible, because it's together that we can persevere through failure to create solutions. Adele, you taught us that reducing stress and developing cognitive flexibility are key parts to that creativity and success for finding solutions, including our ability to adapt, to reframe problems and find joy in that journey. And Jodi, you reminded us that it will take persistence, but there's no reason we can't all be successful in achieving our goals, and that neurodivergence can be a strength when we reach out for support, find that help that we need, so that we can all use whatever skills we have, whatever tools we have, whatever unique perspectives we have to persevere and solve things in our own unique way. Now, it's unfortunate that our time together is ending. I would like again to thank the audience for your fantastic questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but we got through quite a few. The discussion's been fantastic. I want to thank you, all of our panelists, again, for taking the time to share your expertise and experience. Jeremy, Adele, and Jodi, thank you so much for joining us today. We would really appreciate learning more about your experiences, and we ask that you fill out our surveys by scanning these QR codes or clicking the links in the chat. For those of you interested in the event recording, you'll soon be able to find it on our Symposium resource page. And please take a moment to thank our panelists by writing your comments to them in the Q&A now or using the reaction button. We've seen the reactions coming through for the full hour. It's been very nice and uplifting and encouraging. And we hope to see you more in our upcoming events as well. Finally, a thank you to everyone for joining. I want to give a big shout out to the organizations that made today's event possible. Thank you to our event partners, Let's Talk Science, ArcticNet, the Canadian Space Agency, Genome Canada, the Royal Society of Canada, and the Stem Cell Network for putting this together. This event was also generously supported by the Let's Talk Science visionary donors. Thanks again to everyone, panelists, participants, the events team. Remember to stay curious and keep asking those questions. You were all fantastic today. Thank you and goodbye.